Hi, my name is Matt Philippi, and this is a demo on how to connect Microsoft Power BI to an Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and also we'll be using Polybase to connect Azure SQL Data Warehouse to data stored on Azure Blob storage. You can find me on LinkedIn, CPA and Business Intelligence Architect. Feel free to reach out and send me a connection request. Just tell me a little bit of information about yourself and how you found me, and then I'll reply by telling you about what I'm interested in. Also, you can find me out on YouTube. I have a channel. So if you just got to YouTube, search my name, you'll find my channel here. Power BI Data Connectors, Azure, AWS, Tableau, Google, Cloud. Really 4 different components here: Azure Blob Storage, Azure SQL Data Warehouse. We'll be using Management Studio, and then Power BI. Azure SQL Data Warehouse is Microsoft's version of a fully managed petabyte scale data warehouse, massively parallel processing, similar to AWS's Redshift and Google BigQuery. And really the important thing to distinguish here is best explained by using Create Database. So I'm using the created T-SQL Create Database here, and this is the Data Warehouse Edition. So if you're creating a Azure SQL Data Warehouse, you're using the Data Warehouse Edition, whereas if you're using Azure SQL Database, you're using Basic, Standard, Premium, or Premium RS. And then Polybase is best explained by you have your normal tables in Management Studio, and then you have what's called external tables that you can create using Polybase, where you can create a table schema. But then the data source lies outside of Azure SQL Data Warehouse, the database engine. Instead, it can be on Azure Blob Storage in a file, a text file, or a comma-separated file. 7 steps: create the data warehouse, log into Management Studio, Polybase, create an external table and connect to the blob storage file. Then we'll create a table native to Azure SQL Data Warehouse using select as, copying this external table over. Connect to Power BI, create a visualization, and then delete the resource group so we stop paying for resources. Extra critical, especially for this product when you start using clusters. Security and cost boilerplate. It's your job to understand this. I'll be using cloud services, so if you're going to do that, you need to understand how to turn them on, turn off the services, monitor the cost, how much it's going to, understand how much it is going to cost. If you leave something on, you could end up paying a lot of money, so be careful. Step 1, we're going to launch an Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So you're going to want to go log into the portal. I'm logged in here. I'm going to go to the plus button. SQL Data Warehouse. That's what I want. Okay. I'm going to hit create. I'll just call this Power BI demo. Okay. Really important here. Create a resource group, so all of the resources that you launch against this group are tracked together. It makes it really easy to delete all the services so that you make sure you stop paying for it when you're done. Blank database, we don't need to do anything there. The server, so we don't have a server. So let's call this one Power BI demo. Okay. Nope, doesn't like it. So I'll do Power BI 2 demo. How's that? Power BI Azure SQL Data Warehouse. There, how's that? Okay. This won't allow you to use admin as a login name. I think that's reserved. So you put in your password. And you will need to remember both of these in order to log in via Management Studio and Power BI. Okay, so I'm going to hit select. Good there. And then Okay, so performance level 400. I could put it down to 100, but I always find that if I'm going to, the nice thing about the cloud is pay for what you use and when you're using it. So when we're done, we'll just shut it off and you get better performance. So sometimes you just work a lot faster using more horsepower and it ends up costing you the same. So I'm not sure if that's exactly the case here, but I'll just stick with 400 and then I'll do create. And then I'll start the clock to see how long this takes to deploy. Deployment in progress. Okay, about 3 minutes and 20 seconds to deploy that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go here to the cube, go to resource groups, click on Power BI Demo, and then you're going to see what we actually launched here. So we actually launched a server, and then within that server there's a data warehouse. So important distinction. Usually it launches right to this page, but if you go to the resource group that you just created, you can see everything that's been launched. So a server and then all the databases that have been launched against that server. Steps 2, now we're going to connect SQL Server Management Studio to Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And the first thing is we're going to go back to the portal. Okay, and remember when I said, hey, go find your resource group. Our resource group is Power BI Demo. First thing we're going to need to do is open the firewall. And before I do that, one other thing here. So this is the SQL Server. If you're thinking SQL Server on premises, in terms of instances and securities and permissions and the difference between how Azure works, the managed database services versus SQL Server on premise. If you go out and you search SQL Server permissions, you'll find a really cool document right here that tells you all about kind of the whole SQL Server and Azure SQL Database security infrastructure, with the objects and the permissions, and really cool resource actually, whoever put that together. So anyway, the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go to this server. Okay, and then you'll see over here, firewall. Okay, and then I'm going to add client IP. So this is just my specific IP. So I clicked add client IP. That's my IP right there. You won't be able to save it. And then I'm going to save it. So if you don't do this, you won't be able to access through Management Studio or Power BI because you didn't open up the firewall. So this is just specific to my client IP. So I'm going to go back here to Power BI Demo. Then I'll just click on my Azure SQL database here. Okay, there's the server name. I'm going to copy the server name here. I'm going to open Management Studio. Okay, just so you know, I'm using Management Studio version 17.0. Connect, database engine. Okay, SQL Server authentication, username, login, and then put in your password. And then click connect. Okay, and then there we are. We're logged in. Then we can see the databases that are in here. And then you can see, so this is the database. This is the server. This is the database. And what's important here is you can see these little grouped little icons. That means that this is an Azure SQL Data Warehouse database. And remember how I talked about the difference between, so this is Azure SQL Data Warehouse. This is the Data Warehouse Edition. Azure SQL Database, Basic Standard, and Premium. And if you're not using the Data Warehouse and you're intending on it and you don't see these grouped icons, then you're not getting all the benefits of the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, the massively parallel processing, the column store indexing, and so forth. So that's really important if your intention is to set up a data warehouse. Step 3, we're going to create an external table in our SQL Data Warehouse using Polybase. So if you go out and you search load from Azure Blob Storage to Data Warehouse, you'll find this, a really nice, easy to follow tutorial. So we're going to follow this. And there's several steps in here. We'll start with step 1, configure the data source. So create a credential. Skip this step if you're using the Contoso public data. We are. So the Contoso public data is a data set provided by Azure out on blob storage, and there's public access to that. If we wanted to do this using our own storage accounts, we'd have to create and assuming that the storage account wasn't public, we'd have to create a master key and then create a database scope credential. Obviously, not a server scope, but a database scope credential. And then follow these instructions here. So we don't have to do that. We can skip this step. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to create an external data source. So I'm just going to copy this here. I'm going to go out to Management Studio, new query. Okay. Copy that in there. Paste. Okay. So create external data source. Azure Storage West Public is what the name's going to be called, and then here's the actual file that Azure has put out for us on Azure Blob Storage. So I'm going to hit execute. Completed successfully. Now I can go into my Power BI demo data warehouse here, go to tables, external tables. Oh, I'm sorry, external resources is where we want to go, not tables. We'll do tables in a second. External data sources. And there, that's what we just created, a storage, Azure Storage West Public. So step number 2, configure the data format. So I'm going to copy that over here. I'll just copy everything over here. So remember the data source. So I haven't looked in here, but I'm assuming this is correct. So this is the format of this particular file right here, and you can, so I'm going to run that. Okay, and this is actually called text file format. Okay, and you can see that right here, text file format. And then we're going to create a schema. Okay, not just a schema in a general database, but specifically the schema used to track objects as a group. So I'm going to call this one, it's a little, okay, so that's ASB, but I'm just going to call it Azure Blob. Just a little more descriptive. Azure Blob. I'm going to copy that. And then this may take a few seconds, so I'm going to pause it while it does. Okay, that took 14 seconds. And if you go down here and you see security, go to schemas, you'll see Azure Blob. Next. Okay, I'm going to copy this over here. So this is the create the external table. We're going to actually put the columns in there, create the tables themselves. Okay, so I'm going to have to change this because remember I didn't create the ASB. I said Azure Blob. There's a reason why I want to do this, and that's when we do Power BI. It just, when we finally connect to Power BI, it will remind us of the data source. So Azure Blob. Okay, and then if you look in here, so there's actually 2 tables being created, dim product, and then the data source here is what we just created earlier, Azure Storage West Public. The format is the text file format, and then a couple other values here that we need. So I'm going to hit execute and then pause. Okay, 12 seconds. And then if I go up to tables here, I'll highlight tables and I'll hit the refresh button there. And then there's our 2 tables we created. So a dimension table and a fact table. And then I'll just do a quick select star on the dimension table. Definitely not the fact table because I don't know what's in there, but blob.dim product. And then let's see what we get back here. Okay, about 13 seconds to execute that, 2,500 rows. And so this is the actual results of the query, but the data source was in Azure Blob Storage. It wasn't actually in SQL itself. So pretty interesting external table. Step 4, we're going to create a table native to the Azure SQL Data Warehouse using select S. We're just going to copy over these external tables so that they're now in Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and you get the benefits of actually having the database in the database engine. So we can go over here. So it's 4.1. We're still in Polybase from blob storage. And create schema CSO. Okay, I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to call it native. Okay, and I'll execute that. Pause it. Okay, that executed pretty quickly, so we can go down and check to see native is in there. Okay, next step. Go down here, load the data into the new tables. So I'm going to copy this. You can see the select star statement here. I'm going to copy this one. And then I'm going to have to change the schema names here again, because remember I called Azure blob as the source. Azure blob. And if I copy it wrong, it's not good. And then I'm going to want to call this one native and native. Okay. And then let's see here. What else do we have over here? Ah, native. 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 And then execute. And I'll pause it while it executes. Okay. That took 25 seconds to execute. If I go up to tables here and then hit the refresh button, you'll now see that these two native tables exist. So they're really just copies of these two, but the data now resides in the database engine itself. Step 5, we're going to connect Power BI to the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and we're going to download those tables. We're going to download both the Azure Blob Store tables and the native tables, and we're going to benchmark to see if there's any performance and differences in the downloads. So first thing you do is go out to Azure. Always click up here. Then I'm going to go to my resource group here, my Power BI demo resource group. Okay, and then I'm going to click on my SQL Server Data Warehouse here that I created. Then I'm going to go to the server name here and click to copy that server name. Then I will go out to Power BI Desktop. By the way, I am using just a version. I'm using July 2017. I always recommend you get the most up-to-date version. So I'm going to go to Get Data, More, Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Connect. I'm going to paste that server name in. Don't need to put the database in there. We're going to import. We're definitely not going to direct query. If you're doing direct query, you better know what you're doing. And then there's other advanced options we don't need here, like being able to write your specific SQL statements, which is really good. So anyway, click OK. It's going to ask for authentication. Okay, we're not using Windows Active Directory here. We're using SQL Server authentication, which means we need to click on Database. These are those credentials that I put in when we launched the SQL Data Warehouse. Matt. Okay. Now you can see here. Okay, so there's our tables that are in Azure Blob, and then there's the native tables. So I'm going to benchmark these against each other and see which is faster. So I'm going to click on the Azure Blob, the two tables there, the fact table and the dimension table. I'm going to click Load. I'm going to start the clock. Okay. My guess is this will take up to 10 minutes, and I will pause it while it's doing that. So 17 seconds in, I can actually go out here to Management Studio, do a select count on the Azure Blob for the Fact Online table. It's going to tell me how many rows are in here. I'll pause it just a second. Okay, so there's 12 million rows. If I go back here, I can see that the fact online table, it's almost up to 1 million. So loading pretty quickly, but I'll pause it again. Got a minute in. Okay, looks like it's almost done here. 12.6 million rows, almost 7 minutes. Pause it quickly again here while it loads. Okay, 7 minutes and 15 seconds. All right, this time we're going to do it again, except with the tables native. So I'm going to go to get data, same thing, connect, same server name. Oh, I got to go back out and get the server name here. Okay, import. Power BI demo. This time with the tables native to Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Okay. I'm going to click load. Start the clock again. And then I'll pause it while it loads here. So remember, this head needs to get to 12.6 million rows again. Okay, so it's done. 7 minutes, really not much of a difference there. But that's really a select star statement against the fact table. My guess is if you started issuing SQL statements against the native fact table with where clauses and the clustered index, it would come back a lot faster than if you did statements against the Azure blob file using where clauses. As you can see, there's no index here. Step 6, time to create a viz. Okay, so we're in the report here. We really want to go look at the data real quickly here. I actually want to take a look at the data model itself. Okay, so this did a bunch of relationships. I like to go delete any relationships that were automatically created. I think it's pretty dangerous to assume that this got it right. So why don't we just do oops, deleted something there. Oh well, we'll just focus on this one. Okay, so the native fact table here, so you can see there's a product key here, there's a product key here, so native. Drag the product key over, create the relationship. Okay, that should be good. Okay, I'm going to go back. Okay, and now we can go up here and create a dashboard. So why don't we just do a brand name? Okay, so that's native dim product fact table. How about sales amount? Okay, and then hey, let's just create, there we go. Okay, basic visualization. As you can see, Contoso is the winner here with $622 million in sales. So that's our visualization. Pretty basic. Step 7, and the most important step of this whole thing, if you like your money in your bank account and not having it drained. So we're going to delete the resource group to stop paying for the resources. I'm going to click here. Power BI demo. Okay, then we'll see 2 different resources, but we could have a storage account in here. We could have lots of stuff. So I'm going to hit delete. And then you can either type in the resource group name or you can copy it from up here. Delete. You can see it says it's deleting resource group Power BI demo 4:01 p.m. Very important if you don't want to continue paying for this stuff. And these cluster type services are expensive. I think this is $4 an hour. So you leave it on all day, 4 times 24. Ouch. And that concludes this demo on how to connect Microsoft Power BI to Azure SQL Data Warehouse and also use Polybase to connect to data in Azure blob storage. You can reach me at LinkedIn, CPM Business Intelligence Architect. Like I said, if you send me a connection request, make sure you tell me how you found me and what you're interested in. I'll ping you back telling you what I'm interested in. And that way we have at least a somewhat of a connection. And then YouTube. If you go out to YouTube, you'll find my channel here. If you like this video, please like it, and you can also subscribe down in the corner here. So lots of other videos. Thank you for watching.